The dream to climb Mount Everest. A dream that drives people beyond themselves. A dream that pushes them to endure pain and hardship. All this for a chance to stand on a windswept piece of snow and rock no larger than a dining room table.
I'd love to go back. As soon as I can organize it, I'll be there.
I'll probably never go back to Everest. I'll certainly never go back to Everest to climb it.
For friends Jamie Clark and Alan Hobson, the dream became a passion that would bring them together on a path to the summit of Mount Everest.
I often wonder if I was very passionate about it, or did I step into the world of obsession. Passion will get you there. Obsession can get you killed. Does anyone know the actual elevation of Mount Everest, the exact height of the mountain? For a free trip with us in a couple of weeks. Anybody know the altitude of Mount Everest?
29,000?
29,000 feet. You know, that really bothers me, Alan. Everyone just sort of throws out 29,000 feet. You know, it's actually 29,028 feet. It's that last 28 feet that'll kick your butt if you're not paying attention to it. I've always wanted to climb Everest. I grew up here in the Canadian Rockies. So mountaineering and being in the mountains is a place that I feel at home, where I feel comfortable, where I find my most basic peace.
I wanted to see whether I could actually do this. It was a sense of curiosity more than anything else.
In the fall of 1991, Jamie and Alan make their first journey to Everest. They approach from the north side of the mountain and are captivated by its sheer beauty and power. After weeks of back-breaking work, gale force winds rip the upper camp from the mountain. Although only 500 meters short of the summit, the expedition is over. The team retreats, exhausted and discouraged. Three years later, the journey continues as the two friends return to the north side of Everest. They endure weeks of punishing weather and then finally launch a summit bid.
Good evening. A Canadian mountain climber came close to the top of Mount Everest today and close to death.
Just 200 meters from the summit, lead climber John McIsaac succumbs to pulmonary edema, an often fatal accumulation of fluid in the lungs. Jamie, Alan, and the rest of the team focus all their energy and resources on his rescue. They have nothing left for another summit bid.
Well, the expedition is now over. I'm totally thrashed.
And then when he decided he was definitely going to turn back, I remember crying that 3 years of effort should come to this, that we came so close, 200 meters, and yet we didn't make it.
I wanted to have a positive sense of closure with the mountain, which is to say that I wanted to be able to come away from the peak feeling that regardless of whether or not we made it to the summit, that I had given it everything I had.
Well, the previous two times I left Everest, I knew before I even stepped off the mountain that I was going to go back. I knew in my heart that I could do it.
Almost 2 years later, the passion is still alive. Alan and Jamie have organized a third Everest expedition. This time they've added a new element. Via the internet, students will be able to communicate with the climbers as they progress up the mountain.
We hope to share with the students some learning, some lessons that you can't normally find in textbooks.
One school, they can talk to thousands all over
and
the
we
world.
get the information quicker than by mail.
Period. We hope to see you soon.
The Everest team assembles near Banff, in the heart of the Canadian Rocky Mountains.
We picked the people for our expedition based largely on compatibility. We had a fundamental skill set that was necessary to get the job done. The question was, could this person take these skills and work in a group together? Once you get a feeling of the synergy of a group of people working together for that common goal, there's an enormous amount of energy and the thing takes off.
After some training climbs, a lot of logistical planning, and some obligatory media events, expedition coordinator Steve Matus details the challenges that await the team on the route up the south side of Everest.
Climbing up through this undulated, broken up stuff, and the summit is actually a little bit beyond. This is the summit ridge. It's not necessarily highly technical, but you know, you don't want to fall this way, you don't want to fall off that way. You got to pay attention to what you're doing here.
The preparation is over. The adventure is about to begin. With a new team, Jamie and Alan are going back for their third attempt to reach the top of the world. The dream and the mountain await. Kathmandu, capital of the Kingdom of Nepal, staging point for Everest expeditions. The North American team members and 3 tons of gear will be flown to the village of Lukla at the head of the Kumbh Valley. The excitement of the team grows as the reality and immediacy of the adventure sinks in. As the team rises above Kathmandu, the Himalayan peaks come into view, and above all else, rises Everest. The village of Lukla. From here, some 300 loads will be transported by yak and porter over the rocky footpaths that lead out into the Kumbh Valley and onto base camp.
My very first thought, oddly enough, was just about the weather and how dry the place looked. And I thought, well, if it's dry, that means they haven't had a lot of snow in the mountains, which probably means a good foreboding for the future. So I was very excited, and I was very relieved, actually, that all the organizational work, all the training was over, and now we're going to actually be able to make an attempt on this thing.
Part of me never leaves Nepal. So when I've gone back, it's been a sense of reuniting or returning.
Well, this is the major bridge just below. Woo-hoo-hoo. Watch out for yak shit. Woo-hoo. Couple of porters coming by here. Namaste. Namaste.
The Kumbh Valley lies to the south and west of Everest. There are no roads, only rocky trails. There are no vehicles, only yaks and the human foot traffic that plies this ancient trading route between Tibet and Nepal.
Once we flew into Lukla and began the trek, and you saw the snow-capped peaks and got back in and heard the river and the rhododendrons soon to bloom and the river crashing through the valley below and potatoes being planted, then you sort of slide into the culture again and have a sense of being relaxed and back home where you belong. The trek from Lukla to base camp lasts about 10 days. The reason you go slowly is because you want to allow your body to acclimatize to the elevation that you gain each day and start to get in tune with the place. Watch the weather patterns, get to know your fellow climbers away from all the stress of the city.
Without the use of motorized transport, the team must rely on the muscle and willpower of the local porters. On previous expeditions, both Jamie and Alan found the strength of these men truly inspiring.
There were actually some porters who carried more than 80 pounds, 90 pounds of load on their back. This is one of our 4 communications boxes. This thing weighed 250 pounds. Now, 250 pounds is about the weight of your average household fridge. So you get an idea what this is like. When you go home after the conference today, pick up your fridge. Run around the house a couple of times, get an idea of what we were witnessing. Truly an amazing display of physical and psychological strength.
Halfway through the trek, altitude begins to take its toll. With Everest in view, Alan and Jamie both fall sick.
When I fell sick on the trek into base camp, it was just pure frustration. And I knew from our previous experience in 1991, 1994, that if you got sick on Everest, you stayed sick throughout the whole expedition.
When I got sick in Namche Bazaar on the trek in, only a few days en route to Everest Base Camp, I almost panicked. And looking back on it, besides getting sick later on the mountain, that was perhaps my lowest moment.
Although the Khumbu Valley sees hundreds of trekkers each year, its people remain curious about the climbers. Local children are especially curious as team doctor Doug Rivera of Boulder, Colorado, shares pictures of his children.
Adeline and Elizabeth.
A rich Buddhist spirituality permeates every aspect of life in the Khumbu Valley. In village after village, the team visits monasteries to receive the blessings of local lamas. Mantras are chanted, juniper is burned, and silk scarves, or katas, are blessed and hung from the necks of the climbers. As the team moves higher into the Khumbu Valley, the weather becomes less stable. The environment is more severe and less forgiving.
I remember looking around at the memorials for the dead climbers. It was intimidating and frightening to look at how many there were. I said to myself, I'm going to do everything in my power to maximize the chances of staying alive.
Why don't you just hang on one? Okay.
Finally, base camp is reached. At this altitude, air contains only half as much oxygen as it does at sea level. This will be home for the next 2 months.
Happy to be here. My head would stop throbbing.
Everybody's working so hard.
The sense of team begins to crystallize, due in no small part to the role of expedition leader Jason Edwards. A school teacher from Tacoma, Washington, he is also a highly skilled and experienced climber. Jason is an Everest veteran, making his third trip to the mountain.
It's not how good you climb, it's how good you look.
A very unselfish team member, always wondering what was best, not just for the team members, but the Sherpas, as well as the Sherpa families.
The team members have grown close to the 8 Sherpa climbers on the trek in. Strong and experienced, between them, they have made the journey to the summit of Everest some 17 times.
I envy in some ways their quickness to laugh, their sense of connectedness to their environment, their camaraderie, their openness. They give far more than they take, and they ask nothing in return. There's no facade to a Sherpa. He is what he is, she is what she is. It's nice. You don't have to second guess when a Sherpa says something. That's what they feel or believe or think, and you can relax.
As the Sherpas organize the massive food and climbing gear, another key part of the expedition is being set up and tested, the communication system.
Bruce Kirkby, who came to the expedition as our communications coordinator, he was essentially the technician, the mastermind behind setting up a link via satellite back to North America. Bruce set up this conduit which allowed David Rodney to communicate, and it was his job to observe what was happening and put that together into words. Dave, with his mountaineering background and his educational background, knew the mountaineering world and knew how to articulate that in a meaningful way.
Via the internet connection, the kids and the climbers will be able to exchange questions and answers. The kids quickly focus on the dangers ahead. The most immediate of those is the treacherous Khumbu icefall. More people have died here than any other place on the mountain.
Big thing on the icefall is just to control your focus. Don't let your mind stray on, well, what happens if that 5-story building falls on top of me. What happens if I fall into this 50-foot deep crevasse as I'm crossing this ladder? It's all a question of mental focus.
The infamous Khumbu Icefall, a 2,000-foot river of ice squeezed between the west shoulder of Everest and Nuptse. It cascades down from the western Khum, moving more than a meter a day. Large ice blocks, some the size of small apartment buildings, regularly crash down. The icefall represents the most dangerous hazard for the climbers. They will pass through it many times as they establish camps higher on the mountain. Early morning starts will become the norm, as the heat of the sun can loosen ice blocks and trigger avalanches later in the day. Before entering the icefall for the first time, a puja ceremony is organized by the Sherpas. The traditional ceremony asks Everest, or as the Sherpas call her, Chomolungma, Mother Goddess of the World, to permit the team's safe passage on their journey up the mountain.
Due to the Sherpas' Buddhist beliefs and our respect of them, we want to make the Sherpas feel as comfortable as possible on this adventure. Great risk for them to climb the mountain with us.
On your butt, Kami.
During the puja ceremony, our Sherpa climbing partners erect dozens and dozens of prayer flags. And on these flags are prayers. As the wind blows, these prayers are sent to the gods to safeguard our passage from base camp to the summit.
For us, and for myself, not a practicing Buddhist, you participate in those ceremonies out of respect for your Sherpas, and frankly because I think you need all the help you can get.
Although extremely dangerous, the trips through the icefall allow the climbers to continue acclimatizing to the higher altitudes.
I'll give everything I have short of my life, David.
For the powerful Sherpa climbers, who are more accustomed to the altitude, acclimatization is less of an issue, as they carry numerous heavy loads to supply the higher camps. In this twisted jumble of cracks and ice blocks, the crevices must be bridged by ladders. Each morning, a team of Sherpas rechecks anchors and replaces any ladders destroyed by movement during the night. Team member Jeff Rhodes is a professional mountaineer from Pocatello, Idaho. He is a veteran of the south side of Everest and familiar with its hardships.
Endless hours of hard toil, danger, big serac walls ready to move at any time. Some that have already moved. Hours on end of hard walking. It hurts, you can't breathe. You got a headache, you're nauseous. Making the summit is something that's very personal, but it takes a lot of effort.
And you can see the line in the ground, it just disappears. And all this stuff you see here broke off and crushed through the root. Must have happened maybe sometime last night, or I don't want to sit around here too long and wait, but maybe this morning. Luckily no one was in there, because if they were, they surely would have been killed. Really spooky. It's odd, you know, when you're climbing through here, it seems like people get desensitized to the surrounding danger. You know, up between 1 and 2, there's huge crevasses that you're stepping across, and bridges that, God, they don't look like they're going to stand up very long. Anyway, people just keep hauling over them. Look at me, I mean, I'm here. I'm not even clipped into the fix line. I want to get the hell out of here so fast. Anyway, just shows you that the Khumbu Icefall is just a whole world of nastiness. Look at the speed of that. Flying down there so fast. The speed was awesome. Man. If you were down there, you'd have about enough time to kiss your butt goodbye.
Above the icefall, the team will establish 4 camps, each higher than the next. The power of the Sherpa climbers becomes more apparent as they move the bulk of the gear up the mountain, while the Western climbers generally carry lighter loads as they continue to acclimatize. Located midway between base camp and the Lhotse face, Camp 2 serves as an advanced base camp. From here, the team will coordinate activities higher on the mountain.
Camp 2 now to keep things cool. It's pretty nice. The sun's out. We're going to get some work done here before it cools off. Base camp, do you need anything from us? Over.
On their 6th grueling descent through the icefall, Jamie and Alan come across a huge collapse.
Come to the edge and there's a pre-existing rope which has fallen in this collapse. And it's running at a 45-degree angle from a collapsed block of ice right up to our lip. You know, you're looking at crumpled ladders and ropes going everywhere.
Tons of ice. It was kind of scary, actually.
Some discussion with Jamie, well, we can probably rappel that. We can probably rappel down that if it's got enough slack on it. So I clip in, I rappel about 5 feet, and I realize that my weight is causing my rappel device to jam. So I'm now 50 feet over an abyss. I'm 5 feet from the edge, which doesn't sound like a long way, but at 18,000 feet, that is a very long way. And I start to try to ascend up this thing. Heart rate goes, what, 220 easy respiration rate, 70 adrenaline. I'm maxed out jumaring up this rope. I do about 3 jumars lengths, which is about a distance of about that much. He throws one arm over the edge. I grab it like this. I stick my crampons into the ice. One more pull up, 6 inches. I said, "Give me your other arm." And Jamie probably thought to himself, "There's no darn way I'm going to give you my other arm."
I gave it to him.
I get one arm over the edge like this. And then 1, 2, 3, other arm over the edge. Got my knee over the edge, and so I was up, panting on top. I don't think I've ever breathed that hard in my life.
#20, 21st.
The team is becoming accustomed to life on the mountain. As part of their acclimatization, the climbers will spend a night in Camp 3, halfway up the Lhotse face.
Here we are, 23,000 plus, 7,100 meters. Brutal, kicked our ass somewhat. But
we're going to recover.
Yeah, we're on to come back,
brew up some dinner, and then
tell some lies.
And
we'll get back to you.
At these altitudes, lack of oxygen makes sleep extremely difficult,
morning.
further draining the climber's energy.
Our first night at Camp 3.
A little frosty. Maybe a good cup of coffee.
It's now early May. The team has made good progress. Camps 2 and 3 are well established. Expedition leader Jason Edwards begins to plan for the establishment of the final camp at the South Col.
We'd be down here on Friday, and then take about 3 days rest, and then everybody, all Sherpas, all members, move up to Camp 2. And we're shooting for first summit attempt May 9th. Remember, safety is number one. Our team cutting loose.
After weeks of intense preparation, the team regroups in base camp. Everything looks ready for a summit bid within the next few days. It is not to be.
Sounds like about 80% of Camp 2 is flattened.
A cyclone rips free from the Bay of Bengal and tears through the western Coombe, destroying Camp 2.
They just went, they pancaked. And it was amazing. In one gust, an entire camp was gone.
On the north side of the mountain, the consequences are far more severe. 5 climbers have been killed, among them Jamie's friend, Austrian climber Peter Kowalczyk.
We were on the other side of the mountain. It's hard to know what's happening, and we hadn't heard from him for a few days. It was harder for me than I had thought. I met Peter in 1994. We were the same age. He was the leader of his expedition. I was the leader of my expedition, and felt sort of a kindred spirit with him. The friendships that you forge in that environment are pretty intense, because it is an intense environment. I felt bitter, I felt angry that he was gone.
Camp 2 is rebuilt, but the extended time at high altitude takes its toll. Alan and Jamie fall sick again, and the summit attempt must be further delayed.
10:30. I'm not exactly sure what day it is here. I'm currently at Camp 1. My plan is that I'm going to stay here for a couple of hours until the cloud's over, and then I'll make a break for Camp 2. Spend the night up there, but I'm a little discouraged that after all this work and so forth, I mean, I've got a little bug or something, I'm not sure.
The window of opportunity for spring climbs on Everest is small. Often there are only a few days when the raging jet stream winds are pushed off the summit by the approaching monsoon.
Yeah, they'd be there a bit early. They were thinking of about a 6.5 to 7 hour pace, and they took.
The high-level winds set in again. Time is becoming critical. The team must be off the mountain before the arrival of the heavy snowfalls near the end of May. Only days remain in which to launch a summit bid.
What's the news?
Nothing good.
Really?
Yeah. More wind.
Oh no.
He's saying not as far ahead as they can see. All they can see is the same.
Altitude, physical exhaustion, and the strain of waiting all start to wear on the climbers.
Frustrating, to say the least. Plans change every 4 to 5, 6 hours, depending on the weather, depending on how people are feeling, depending on what's going on, depending on politics in the camp, fighting, who knows what. And it seems like we spent more time on this trip strategizing than we have climbing, and it's frustrating for me, and I'm getting a little tired of it. There's a knife-edge ridge between the south summit and the base of the Hillary Step. On the right-hand side of this ridge, there's an 8,000-foot drop, sheer drop into Tibet. And the left-hand side, there's a 6,000-foot drop into Nepal. And in places, the ridge is a foot and a half wide at the most. And it just tears you to shreds emotionally.
With time running out, pressure mounts to launch a summit bid. When the forecast seems to indicate an imminent break in the weather, a decision is made to leave without team member Jeff Rhodes. Jeff has put in weeks of grueling effort preparing the route for the team. Now, sick with bronchitis, he must stay behind in base camp and hope to recover in time to make his own attempt. The team makes Camp 2 and begins final preparations for the 3-day push to the summit. Oxygen tanks are double-checked and masks are fitted.
We get the weather, and if we play our cards right, I think we should be able to come back with a successful summit.
Hey, I feel awesome. I'm ready to go. Let's roll. Let's go climb this mountain. South Call's right up there, 26,200 feet. We're going to be up there on top of the south.
We're feeling a lot stronger than the first time we came up. Just chugging our way. You can still hear the wind pounding some 3,000 feet above us.
We're going to shoot for the 23rd still. 38 to 43 knots, which is approaching 80 kilometers an hour. So pretty windy. Our plan is to go up to Camp 4 tomorrow, hang out there and try to do our push on the 23rd to the summit.
Despite the near crippling fatigue, the team members rally for the push to Camp 4.
It's impossible to describe the degree of fatigue that you experience on Everest, because it's not just like running a marathon, it's over in a few hours. This thing comes after week after week after week. It wears you down. You're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, you don't feel well. And I think Jamie said it best when he said that he felt like his bone marrow was tired.
Okay. If we fall here, it's all the way down there.
I was excited and nervous. We arrived into Camp 4 after coming up from Camp 3. And of course, it's a long day because you just really get into camp, set it up, rest for a few hours, and jump up and take off again. And of course, you can't sleep. You hear the wind hammering in the tent, and you wonder. All these questions pounding through your head. Will we make it? Will we make it? Will we get into trouble? Will we be blown from the ridge? Will somebody get killed? Will somebody fall off? All these things whipping through your head. But you sort of talk yourself out of them and put them behind.
So we're here, Camp 4, inside the tent. Got Al. And over here with Jay, having some liquids. Yeah. How are you? Hey, Cal. You got a boo? We don't think so clearly up here.
4.5, that's a pretty good time.
4.5 hours from Camp 3 to Camp 4. Still not as fast as our Sherpas. So without the Sherpas, we obviously would never, ever climb this mountain. Awesome being here. It's just totally cool.
After a short rest, Alan and Jamie check in by radio with the team back at base camp.
Bruce Hudson here at 4, you copy, over.
Roger, Alan, I copy.
Send love to all of you. You guys have been awesome. It's been 10 years in the making. And we're going to get everything we have short of our lives, over.
We copy, Alan, over.
Can't talk at the moment, but just want you to know that I think the altitude makes me emotional, but when we stand up there, you guys are going to be right there with us. We'll talk to you later. Jamie out.
The wind had been blowing hard across the col all day. And at 10 minutes to 9, the wind stopped. Dead.
Finally, at 11 o'clock, we crawled out of our tent. The moon was up, the wind was light, now it had dropped off.
I opened the door of my tent, I looked out and there was a full moon. And it was a message from the mountain for me that clearly said, okay boys, you tried this thing twice now, here's your chance.
By 11:30 we were loaded, crampons on, headlamps on, climbing up the shoulder toward the summit.
A short way above Camp 4, the team splits up. Jamie and Jason are climbing ahead with 3 Sherpas, Lakpa, Galbu, and Norbu. Alan's oxygen set is malfunctioning, and he has fallen behind with Sherpas Kami and Tashi. Above Alan, Jason is also experiencing difficulties. The altitude has caused a retinal hemorrhaging in Jason's eyes. He can no longer see clearly enough to attempt the summit.
Jason, you're aware that Ming was on the way up to give you a hand.
Yeah, I think it's probably the wisest thing. Left eye is like 70 to 80, and right eye is about 10 to 15% down. Over.
Do you take care, Jay? We're really thinking about you, and I know Doug's certainly concerned about how you're going to do walking with that eye.
Roger, thanks a lot, you guys.
On this, his 3rd attempt at Everest, Jason Edwards must make the courageous decision to turn back. Taking Jamie's radio, he is assisted back to Camp 4 by Norbu. Far below, Jeff Rhodes has left base camp in a last-minute attempt to move up and position himself for a summit bid. This despite the fact that his bronchitis has deteriorated into a serious throat infection. It is a losing battle.
Hey, base camp, Jason, this is Jesse Coffee. Yeah, Jeff, go ahead, pal. I basically ground to a halt. About a third of the way up the ice fall. Had to turn back. So my summit bid's toast.
You can sort of be damned by faint praise. You feeling okay, bud?
Yeah, I'm not feeling like I did last time I came through here.
Well, you're older now, over.
Jamie and Alan continue their now separate journeys up the mountain.
A big gust of wind came along and blasted a cloud of snow into my hood. It went around about 3 times and then went straight down my back. And I became an instant icicle. And I said to the Sherpa I was with, whose name was Cammy, we need to go down. He was almost like he didn't hear me. He said, Alan, in 1991, no summit. 1994, no summit. And he leaned forward, he looked me straight in the eye, which is very unusual for a Sherpa to do. And he said, 1997, very important, summit.
Roger that. That's great news on camping, over.
And I knew it was going to be a spectacular day when I was climbing behind Galbu and I kept banging in with my head. I had my head down. I kept bumping into his backpack. And we swung out onto the south summit, and dawn was upon us in the sun, and you could just see Tibet stretching out, and the glaciers like snakes in the valley below working themselves around, and off in the distance, an ocean of clouds, cut up by these huge Himalayan peaks, Kanchenjunga, Makalu, just blasting up from the horizon. And you could see this huge shadow of Everest playing across the monsoon clouds. And I imagined myself for a moment at a rest break, a little minuscule dot on the trailing edge of that shadow, struggling up the mountain, and kind of looked over to see if I could see myself 100 kilometers away on the cloud. Walking along the ridge, and you're pounding your ice axe into the cornice, and you pull out your ice axe, and you can see, 7,000 feet down the other side, the whole world dropping away.
I remember I was just shaking coming across there. I deliberately didn't look down. I deliberately concentrated entirely on my feet. And I remember at one point passing a hole in the snow where one of the previous climbers had obviously put their ice axe in to get more purchase, had popped right through the snow. And I looked right down 8,000 feet into Tibet. And my stomach just went in my mouth, and I immediately snapped my gaze back onto my feet and continued to the base of the step. But it was by far the most frightening part of the climb for me. Absolutely terrifying.
We swung up onto the Hillary step, and it was a technical bit of climbing, but just pounded my axe in, jammed my hand in a crack, placed my foot, and up we went.
The Hillary step is a rock step about 30 or 40 feet high. It's about 100 meters, vertical meters down from the summit of Everest.
On the way up the mountain, on the Hillary step, I encountered a pretty grisly sight. There, hanging upside down, tangled in the ropes, was a fallen climber from 1996. He had fallen on his way down and had got caught in the ropes and flipped upside down and died there. And it shocked me, because in 2 seasons of climbing, no one had stopped to cut the climber loose. Nobody wants to stop. When you're on the way to the summit, why stop and do this? At great risk, you stop. Pete Athens was the only person who had stopped, and I felt it was time that I should help him. And we cut him loose and committed his body to the mountain and climbed on.
Back home, family and friends wait anxiously for news from the mountain.
Swung up onto the summit ridge and then just walked very slowly with the Sherpas. And I remember coming up to the summit, the rise, and then realizing that that was it. This was the top, because then you could see there was no more up, and Tibet started to sort of rise up in the background, so you could sense that you're coming up on the hump of the summit. I spread out my arms and I spun around in 360 degrees. I could feel the horizon bending in the wonder of my peripheral vision. I could feel and sense the mountain, its mass beneath me. And just...
Jamie made the summit at 7 a.m.
was a moment of pure bliss. I'll never forget it. Although it was a solitary moment, I felt in this windswept place that power came from the people who had joined the journey and believed in the dream. My family, my friends, the school kids who had followed us on the internet.
Step heading down, Fast Allen. We summited at 7:10 a.m. Over. Fantastic news, Jay. We're just overjoyed for you. Over.
Jamie just called at Hillary Step, passing Alan at the step. Al is going strong. We are awaiting his call from summit.
I was coming up on the summit of Everest shortly before 9 o'clock in the morning on May the 23rd. I could see the summit there. It was a bunch of tattered flags, weathered flags, and a beaten up weather instrument.
DVR Hobson here. All I'd like to say is you're persistent enough. You can do the dreams. Over.
You got it, man. You've got it. You're halfway there. Don't you forget that. Come on down, back safe, and we'll have a big party.
And Jamie and I had always believed that we could climb Everest. It was an affirming moment. My gosh, here we are.
Alan reached the summit at 9 a.m.
We're going to take some pictures with the boys here. We're going to head down real slowly.
When they come down from the summit, that's actually supposed to be the most dangerous part. So after I found out that they'd summited, it's kind of, that must have been the hardest time for Jamie's, like for the climbers' families, because I'm sure they know that as well, that that's the most dangerous.
The descent for me was, without question, the most frightening 5.5 hours of my life. Strung out in the rarefied air, legs to the point where they're almost collapsing underneath me. On the south summit, I actually found myself face first in the snow, shivering from the cold. A Sherpa got a parka onto me, and somehow I was able to continue. But it got to the point where I would take 30 steps and sit in the snow, get up and take 30 more steps and sit in the snow. It seemed like I would never get to the bottom, like it was an interminable descent.
Stand by, Jamie. Mary, I got someone here who wants to speak to the whole office. Can you guys just stand by for a second?
Okay, hang on.
Okay, Jamer, I got the OAS office online. Go ahead, you're going to talk to them.
Copy, to Camp 4. Do you copy? It was, beyond a doubt, Lee, my most glorious day.
And I remember listening to Jamie on the radio, and he was actually talking by satellite telephone through our radios back to North America, and they were all celebrating the fact that he was back in Camp 4. And here I was listening to this, thinking, don't these people know that I could die here? And finally I just shut my radio off and spent my time with the Sherpas, taking 30 steps at a time.
We can't celebrate really until we get back to base camp, and still have probably a tenuous hour until Al gets back to Camp 4. Gonna hang here and wait for him.
Finally, Alan reaches the relative safety of Camp 4. Here the team will rest before descending the 5,000-foot wall of ice that is the Lhotse face. The team quickly dismantles their lower camps as the weather deteriorates and the monsoon begins to set in. Double and triple loads are carried, and everyone is anxious to return to base camp. For the exhausted climbers, it's a race against the weather. Now, all that stands between them and the safe haven of base camp is one final trip through the jagged and shattered world of the Khumbu icefall.
It was the end of the expedition for us. We left Camp 2. We began our descent. A team of Sherpas came firing past us, about 4 guys, moving fast, as Sherpas always do. Big loads, all jokes, laughing. We stopped together, had some drinks. Carson was among those Sherpas. They continued off down the route. Less than 5 minutes later, we came upon 4 or 5 Sherpas gathered around this crevasse, 45 meters into the belly of this crevasse. We heard, we didn't see him actually, the sounds of this fallen Sherpa, and realized that it was Carson.
Go, Jamie.
Here's another situation. The sure probably fell off, looks to me at least 30 meters into a crevasse. We're trying to pull him out. I don't know what his injuries are.
I tied Jason into the rope. I set up an anchor station and lowered him into the hole. And I could see in Jason's face when he came out of the darkness, out of the cold from the crevasse, the look in his eyes. I mean, he's a professional mountaineer. He's seen grizzly sights before. But the look in his eyes telegraphed to me that this was a bad situation.
Where's the end of the damn IV? I gave it to somebody to hold. Tell him not to move. Don't move, don't move. There, I want this tape so it doesn't come out. Okay, let that go wide open. Wide open. Where do you control? Wide open. There we go. Hold it up. Hold it up. Hold it up.
Yeah, way up, way up, way up. And by the time we had him splintered up and sat on our stretcher, there were 45 people swarming around the area in a dangerous place, in the icefall, surrounded by seracs and crevasses. The potential for avalanche was horrendous because we were late in the day now. Loaded him up.
Everybody got it? Okay, go. Okay, move the stretcher off.
And started firing him down to our makeshift hospital that awaited him in our camp.
Good job, good job. Easy, easy. How's he doing?
Pull on the pink ropes, please. Keep it tight. Maybe you end up taking your left leg.
He smacked himself good. Oh, it sounds like face. He's like, from here is one big hole up into his eye, so you could just get pulled back.
हेलो सर आज यो के रे यो आज हेलिकप्टर जोसरी नि पठाइदिनु अरे आउँदैछ भन्नु
It was symbolic of what the Sherpas mean to the climbers. You know, here was a chance for us, finally, to do something for the Sherpa community. And I think we felt good about that.
Doug Rivera's mountainside surgery allows Karsong to make a full recovery. He's expected to be back climbing next season.
You know, success is a really elusive thing, you know. It's a feeling of peace and contentment. And I remember the words of a Sherpa who said that he is successful who has enough.
Having just finished this odyssey, it's certainly shaped who I am and changed the very core of my being. That tension that's been driving you every day, day after day, all your life is gone. In its place has come a sense of calm, a sense of peace within me.
For 39 years, my entire focus has been on achievement. Now I'd like to focus on enjoyment instead and having a lot more fun. Smell the roses, drink more milkshakes, eat more pizza.
One of the things I've learned from Everest is that on the other side of fear is freedom.